Welcome to today's deep dive. Now, if you're listening to this right now, chances are you have at least a passing familiarity with the massive culture-shifting sounds of icons like Elvis Presley.
Right, or Johnny Cash.
Exactly. Johnny Cash, you know the swagger, you know that rhythm, you know that really distinct blend of soul and gospel and country that basically conquered the globe.
It really did.
But have you ever paused to wonder how that foundational sound actually came to be? Like, where did the DNA for that music originate before it ever reached a recording studio in Memphis?
That's the real question.
So today we are tracing that lineage way back, to a name that might not be immediately recognizable to you, but a man who fundamentally shaped the soundtrack of American music. His name is Charles Davis Tillman.
It is quite a journey, and an unexpected one. I mean, we're going to be exploring how one individual essentially became a cultural conduit. He was someone who took wildly eclectic sources, from old poems to tent meeting spirituals, and just flowed them into a unified genre that we now recognize as Southern gospel.
Yep.
And in doing so, he completely changed the way music was consumed and shared and popularized in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Absolutely. We've got a great foundational text for our deep dive today, pulling from a comprehensive Wikipedia article detailing Tillman's life and work. And the mission of this deep dive is to figure out how a guy who started out as a door-to-door salesman used an incredible knack for synthesis, essentially acting like an early musical producer or DJ to become the architect of Southern gospel.
A DJ of the 1890s.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with where he came from. Because if you're picturing a guy sitting in some pristine conservatory studying classical theory, you are in for a surprise.
That is about as far from his reality as you can get. And honestly, his lack of formal, isolated training is exactly what gave him the tools to do what he did. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you don't create populist music by separating yourself from the populace.
That makes perfect sense. So Charles Davis Tillman, who often went by Charlie D. Tillman, was born in Tallahassee, Alabama in 1861.
Right at the onset of the Civil War.
Yeah, deep south. He was the youngest son of a Baptist preacher, James Lafayette Tillman, and his wife Mary Davis Tillman. Now, given that his father was a preacher, you might assume he went straight into church music right off the bat.
You would think so.
But he didn't. For 14 years, leading up to 1887, his resume was, well, it was incredibly varied. He spent time painting houses, he worked selling sheet music for a company out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and then he spent time peddling something called wizard oil.
Wizard oil. It paints quite a picture, doesn't it?
It really does.
If you're not familiar with the era, wizard oil was a quintessential patent medicine. Like a liniment usually sold out of the back of a wagon in traveling medicine shows.
It's just such a vivid image. You can almost see the crowds gathering around listening to a pitch.
Yeah.
What do you think a job like that actually teaches a person, especially someone who eventually goes into the music business?
Well, it teaches you everything about human nature. It teaches you how to capture a crowd's attention, how to hold it, and how to close a sale. You have to read the room perfectly. He spent 14 years on the ground, interacting with everyday people, learning what resonated with them emotionally and practically. Combine that raw, grassroots sales experience with the intrinsic understanding of church dynamics he got from his father.
That's a powerful mix.
It is a highly unusual, yet highly effective skill set. He wasn't just learning to be a musician, he was learning to be a marketer.
Which brings us to 1887, the year he finally decides to pivot. He leans heavily into that church background and his natural musical talents. He starts singing first tenor in a church male quartet, which gets him performing regularly.
Yeah.
But more importantly, he takes a massive leap as an entrepreneur. He sets up his own church-related music publishing company right in Atlanta.
And this is the crucial structural piece of the puzzle. Atlanta was rapidly becoming a major hub in the post-war South. By establishing his own publishing company, he wasn't just an artist waiting for someone else to distribute his work.
Right, he had the keys.
He built his own infrastructure. He now had a direct pipeline to distribute the music he was encountering, which perfectly sets the stage for a moment that changes American music history.
Which takes us to 1889. Tillman is in Lexington, South Carolina. He's assisting his father with a tent meeting, those massive outdoor religious gatherings that were central to social and spiritual life at the time.
Very common back then.
Right. So on a Sunday afternoon, his father actually lends the tent to an African-American group for a singing meeting. Young Tillman is standing there, and he hears them singing a spiritual called The Old Time Religion.
A pivotal moment.
He is so struck by the power and the rhythm of it that he quickly grabs a scrap of paper and scrawls down the words and the rudiments of the tune right then and there.
And this is where that publishing infrastructure we just talked about comes into play. A great ear is one thing, but having the means to print and distribute is another entirely.
Exactly.
He took that scrap of paper back to Atlanta, worked on it, and in 1891, he published the work to his largely white church market in a collection he called the Revival Songbook.
Now, to be historically accurate here, Tillman was not the first person to publish this song. G.D. Pike actually published a version way back in 1873 in a book for the Jubilee Singers.
Yes.
But Tillman's version was distinct. He added new verses. Some suspect he pulled from oral traditions he'd heard elsewhere, or maybe he penned them himself, and he tweaked the rhythm. He gave it a cadence that just sticks in your head, making it incredibly catchy for a congregation to sing along to.
This is a complex but essential piece of American musical history. What Tillman did was essentially take a spiritual one that originated within an African-American community and, through his publishing company, adapt and market it specifically for white Southern congregations.
Right.
It is a clear example of cultural appropriation driven by commercial publishing. And the adaptation didn't stop with him. Later editors who followed Tillman, like Elmer Leon Jorgensen, further formalized the song for that white target market. Well, Jorgensen went so far as to change the first line to, "'Tis the old-time religion," because that phrasing better accommodated the specific sensibilities and tastes of white Southern churches at the time.
It's fascinating how a piece of music evolves as it moves through different cultural filters, and the ripple effect of that specific blending, that exact style of gospel-derived music that Tillman helped formalize, is staggering.
It really is.
When you listen to the early pioneers of rock and roll, people like Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley, you are hearing the direct descendants of that style. You can literally trace a line from that tent meeting in South Carolina in 1889 through Tillman's songbook right into the foundational DNA of rock and roll.
Because what Tillman helped engineer was a synthesis of styles that made the music broadly, almost universally, appealing across the South.
Yeah.
His specific arrangements characterized the song for generations of Southerners moving forward. It simply became embedded in the cultural bedrock.
And it didn't just stay in the rural South either. If you can believe it, this song made its way to Hollywood.
Oh.
The specific SATB vocal arrangement, so soprano, alto, tenor, bass, that Tillman used in his songbooks was well known to Alvin York, the famous World War I hero. Because of that personal connection to York, Tillman's arrangement actually became the background song for the 1941 Academy Award-winning film Sergeant York.
Amazing.
So you have a song that started as an oral spiritual, was jotted down on a scrap of paper in a tent, published in a regional songbook, and eventually broadcast to millions in movie theaters across the globe.
It perfectly demonstrates the power of media, even early media, like printed songbooks, to carry a local, communal tune to global prominence. And what's interesting is that Tillman wasn't a one-hit wonder. He replicated this success shortly after, demonstrating a true genius for collaboration and layering.
Let's talk about that follow-up hit. In 1890, Tillman decides to set music to a hymn written by a Baptist preacher named M.E. Abbey. The hymn was called Life's Railway to Heaven.
A classic.
But the origin goes even deeper than that. Abbey had actually drawn his lyrics from an even older poem called The Faithful Engineer by William Shakespeare Hayes. So if you look at the anatomy of this song, you have Hayes' original poem, Abbey's lyrical adaptation, and finally, Tillman's musical composition bringing the whole thing to life.
It is a profoundly layered creation.
Yeah.
And the resulting song, which is also widely known by its first line, "Life is like a mountain railroad," resonated with people on a massive scale.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Just think about the sheer variety of artists who have recorded this track over the decades. It's a who's who of American music. You have traditional acts like Boxcar Willie, the Carter Family, Bill Monroe, the Chuck Wagon Gang, the Oak Ridge Boys.
Incredible lineup.
But then you cross over into huge mainstream success. Tennessee Ernie Ford recorded it, Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash, even Brad Paisley. It spans entire generations and genres.
And what is particularly interesting about Life's Railway to Heaven is how the song itself technically evolved alongside the artists who recorded it. Tillman originally wrote his tune 34 time.
Oh.
For those trying to visualize that, 34 time has a waltz-like rolling feel to it. Think 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It sways. But fast forward to 1959, and Patsy Cline records a solo version. She, or her producers, shifted the song into 44 time.
Oh, wow.
That changes the entire emotional feel of the track. It gives it a more standard, driving, marching rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it was that 44 version that caught on and became incredibly widespread.
It totally changes the groove, and that 44 groove became the definitive version. In fact, Willie Nelson later took that exact 1959 Patsy Cline recording and dubbed his own voice over it to form a posthumous duet.
That's right.
And when Brad Paisley performed it as a guest on Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion way back in 2012, he was using that updated 44 time. The song just kept adapting.
Which shows how a well-structured song acts as a living document. It doesn't stay frozen on the page. It's constantly updated by the artists who interact with it. But its cultural reach went far beyond gospel or country artists.
How far did it go?
Members of the Western Writers of America actually chose it as one of the top 100 Western songs of all time. It was featured prominently in the 1979 TV movie Mr. Horn.
And it even crossed over into labor movements. The melody and some elements of the train imagery from the lyrics were adapted into a union protest song called Miner's Lifeguard.
I love that detail.
Yeah. The coal miners used it to protest mine operators who were cheating workers out of honest weight on the scales. Instead of a train to heaven, the refrain became a rallying cry.
This raises an important question. How does one man working in the late 1800s consistently create music that appeals across so many drastically different demographics, from churchgoers to cowboys to striking coal miners?
Yeah, how does he do it?
It comes back to that concept of synthesis. Tillman was exceptionally skilled at taking existing texts that had deep emotional resonance and pairing them with tunes that felt both familiar and fresh.
I really do think of him like a modern music producer. If you look at how a lot of pop or hip-hop tracks are made today, a producer might take a vocal hook from an old soul record, lay it over a beat from a different track, add a new bass line, and suddenly you have a massive new hit.
Exactly.
Tillman was doing the exact same thing in the 1890s. And maybe the best example of this is his work on the song I Am a Poor Wayfaring Stranger.
That track is perhaps his most hauntingly beautiful piece of synthesis.
If you look at how he built it, it's like a recipe. He took lyrics from a book called Bever's Christian Songster, which was published back in 1858. But he didn't stop there. He grabbed 2 additional stanzas from a completely different book, Taylor's Revival Hymns and Plantation Melodies from 1882.
So he's mashing up lyrics from 2 different decades.
Right. Finally, he pairs those combined lyrics with a haunting minor key tune that featured various African-American and Appalachian musical nuances.
Now, to fully appreciate what he did here, we have to look at how that tune was previously sung. It existed in the Sacred Harp shape note tradition.
Shape note singing, right.
Yes. If you're not familiar with it, shape note singing was a brilliant, highly democratic system used in the South where the note heads on the sheet music were actually printed in different shapes: triangles, squares, circles. It allowed congregations with no formal musical training to learn to sing complex harmonies simply by recognizing the shapes.
That's so smart.
It was a beautiful tradition, but somewhat insular. Tillman took that melody out of the shape note tradition, standardized it, and brought it to the broader masses in his 1891 Revival Songbook. The combination of those lyrics and that melody was so striking that the tune itself has been widely recognized in hymnals simply as Poor Wayfaring Stranger ever since.
And again, the legacy of that specific track is incredible. Think about Burl Ives. He loved the song so much he didn't just record it. He used it as the title for 2 of his albums and his own autobiography. You also have folk icons like Joan Baez putting their spin on it, Dusty Springfield, Emmylou Harris.
Such a range.
Even modern rock artists like Jack White, right alongside the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, have recorded it. He didn't just write a song, he engineered a folk standard that has survived for over a century.
His output was also incredibly prolific. The sources list many other works that followed this pattern of rapid synthesis. There is My Mother's Bible, which falls into a popular genre of the time known as tearjerker mother songs. The lyrics were written by an evangelist named Milan Williams.
And what gets me about that one is the speed. The story goes that Williams brought the lyrics to Tillman, they sat down to collaborate, and just 30 minutes later, they had a completed song. Half an hour.
That is fast.
And that song was so structurally sound that it eventually made its way into highly respected, stately hymnals.
What's fascinating here is how quickly his work traveled, not just across the United States, but globally. Take another song of his, When I Get to the End of the Way. It was included in a major British publication called Favorite Hymns of the Church, all the way in Britain. Yes, and it wasn't pushed by some massive marketing campaign. It was included in that British hymnal because of sheer demand from migrating churchgoers who had learned the song from Elmer Leon Jorgensen's Himmel in the States.
Yeah.
The music was traveling ahead of the publishers.
Wow. He also understood the mechanics of what makes a song popular, what makes it sticky. He did this with a song called Ready. He took lyrics written by a British author named Asa C. Palmer. Now, Palmer wrote these lyrics with 5 standard quatrains, just blocks of poetry.
Standard hymn format.
Right. Tillman looks at it, thinking exactly like a pop producer, and realizes the song needs a hook. So he takes the first quatrain and literally moves it to become a repeating refrain. He knew that repeating a chorus gives people something to anchor to. He wrote a brand new tune to fit this new structure and published it in his Revival No. 4 songbook in 1903.
And that editorial decision was so effective that the tune he wrote became intrinsically linked to Palmer's lyrics. In the United States, that specific melody is invariably and exclusively used when singing those words. In fact, the tune is now officially named Tillman in his honor.
So if we look at the scope of his career, we have a guy who spent most of his life operating out of Georgia and Texas, publishing a staggering 22 songbooks. But the thing you have to realize is that he wasn't just a print media guy sitting behind a desk. He was a multi-platform media star decades before we even had a word for it.
His personal reach extended well beyond his published pages. To give you an idea of his status at the time, in 1893 at the World Convention of Christian Workers in Boston, Tillman actually served as the song leader in place of Ira D. Sankey.
That's a huge deal.
It is. Sankey was the musical associate of Dwight L. Moody, who was arguably the most famous evangelist of the era. Stepping into Sankey's shoes at a world convention shows a tremendous level of contemporary recognition. He was a genuine celebrity in that sphere.
And his influence became institutionalized. In 1927, he published something called the Assembly Book. It was so highly regarded that both the states of Georgia and South Carolina officially selected it to be used for the musical scores in their public school programs. If you were a kid going to school in those states, you were learning music through Charlie Tillman's specific lens. Plus, because he always understood distribution, he was a massive early adopter of new technology. He broke into radio almost immediately.
Which is the logical next step. If your entire career is built on finding the best ways to get music into people's ears, radio is the ultimate tool.
Exactly. He performed regularly on WSB 750 AM out of Atlanta. He secured recording contracts and put out tracks on Columbia Records. And in 1930, the NBC radio network gave him a full 1-hour national broadcast featuring his singing, with his daughter accompanying him on the piano.
Amazing progression.
He systematically conquered print, the stage, the public school system, vinyl records, and finally, broadcast radio.
He fundamentally understood how to package and deliver content to an audience, adapting to whatever medium was available to him.
So, what does this all mean for you listening to this deep dive right now, whether you work in music, business, or any creative field? I think Tillman's life proves something really profound about the nature of innovation. We so often fall into the trap of thinking that true innovation means inventing something entirely from scratch, staring at a blank page or a blank screen, until a completely original, unprecedented idea hits you. But Charlie Tillman's entire career shows us that innovation is frequently just about synthesis.
Right, pulling things together.
It's the ability to look at diverse existing sources, a scrap of paper at a tent meeting, a dense 19th century poem, a traditional Appalachian shape note tune, and see the hidden value in them. It's about combining those disparate elements in unexpected ways, refining the rough edges, and understanding exactly how to package that new creation so it resonates with your audience.
That's exactly right. He was a curator. Just as much as he was a creator, he listened closely to the world around him, collected the pieces that moved people, and his curation effectively shaped the musical landscape of the 20th century.
It really is an incredible journey. Charles Davis Tillman started out painting houses and pitching wizard oil from the back of a wagon. From there, he built a publishing empire, became a central architect of Southern gospel, broke into the fledgling radio industry, and assembled songs that would go on to influence rock and roll legends and reshape hymnals across multiple continents.
Like a legacy.
Truly. He was rightfully inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame, and his legacy is memorialized in the Southern Gospel Museum and Hall of Fame.
He passed away in 1943, living into his early 80s, and he is buried in Westview Cemetery in Atlanta. I want to leave you with one final image to ponder regarding that resting place.
Okay.
Charles Davis Tillman spent his life writing music for other people's words and adapting existing songs for new audiences. If you go to his grave today, the monument bears the lyrics to Life's Railway to Heaven. Those are words that were originally penned as a poem by William Shakespeare Hayes, adapted by the preacher Emmy Abbey, and only set to music by Tillman. What does it say about the nature of art and the reality of legacy when a musician's eternal monument is etched with words he didn't even write, but merely gave the wings to fly?